Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Welcome back to the 4th box, everybody. We are once again joined by a guest who we will be bringing in momentarily. As usual, we will get started with a quote and a toast from Pops here in just a moment. But just a reminder that if you haven't already given us a follow, please do so wherever you're listening to this. If it is on Apple, Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, etc., please remember to go ahead and do that. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know what to do. Pops, why don't you go ahead and get us started with the basics?
Okay, hello, 4th box listeners. We are happy to be coming to you once again tonight from our Virtual Buckman Tavern. You know, it's the place on Lexington Green where the patriots used to gather to discuss the tyranny that they were living under. On that fateful day, April 19, 1775, the skirmish took place that later became known as the Shot Heard Round the World, beginning the first American Revolution. So we like to call to mind the Buckman Tavern, and we tell you that we're coming to you from the Virtual Buckman Tavern. We're here at the 4th Box Studio. So welcome back, everybody. We're happy to have you along for the ride tonight. For my toast, I am toasting, of all things, the Supreme Court in Florida this month that they ruled that it is not in Florida's best interest for the ABA, American Bar Association, to be the sole gatekeeper deciding which law school graduates are eligible to sit for the state's general bar exam. So the American Bar Association has been criticized for forcing diversity, equity, and inclusion practices on universities in order for them to maintain recognition, essentially requiring schools to adhere to racial quotas. So the Supreme Court in Florida ruled against that, which I'm raising my glass tonight. I have a Belgian white. I'm raising my glass as a salute to the Florida Supreme Court. So, Nostrovia.
Okay, cheers to that. I've got coconut water, a little less exciting.
And my quote for tonight, before we bring our guest in: restriction of free thought and free speech is the most dangerous of all subversions. It is the one un-American act that could most easily defeat us. And that came from William O. Douglas, former Associate Supreme Court Justice, who passed away in 1980. But I think he may have been the longest serving Supreme Court Justice. So that's our quote for tonight, focusing largely on what we know is becoming a more pressing issue, and that is the silencing of free speech and even thought in some parts of the world. They're trying to monitor that. So that's our quote tonight to leap us into our discussion.
Yeah, perfect. That's a great quote. I think it gets us rolling nicely into what we're going to be talking about this evening. So with that, we are going to introduce our guest, Jeff Dornik, founder of Maverick Broadcasting, host of The Jeff Dornik Show, a leading voice for faith, family, and freedom, quite similar to the things that we hold dear here at the 4th Box. Jeff has been on the front lines of independent media, building platforms that challenge the mainstream narrative and equip everyday Americans to stand for liberty and truth. Tonight, we're excited to talk about who he is, the work he's doing, and get his perspective on the direction that this country and the world is heading. So with that, welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Yeah, awesome. We're really excited about it. Let's just go ahead and get started with the basic introduction. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so for I've hosted the Jeff Dornik Show since probably 2020, and before that I had a Christian theological show where I just interviewed pastors and theologians on, their take on issues that was happening within the church. Then I jumped over to politics. And obviously, like a lot of people during COVID, there, was hit with all sorts of censorship, like attacks from big tech all over the place. So I got permanently banned on Twitter for interviewing a Black conservative about why the African American community was so hesitant to get vaccinated. He brings up the Tuskegee experiments. I get permanently banned off of Twitter. And then Spotify actually banned us for a period of time. The entire network, because we were talking about election fraud one too many times. So definitely dealt with a lot of the censorship, in this kind of like political commentary space. And then about 2 years ago, I saw, after Elon bought Twitter, converted it to X, I kind of began to see the writing on the wall that X was not going to be an actual free speech platform, even though they say that it is. And then they came out with this policy, which is the most idiotic policy you can imagine if you're going to claim to be free speech. And you can literally go look it up right now today in the terms of service, which says that you have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, which means they'll allow you to say whatever you want, but that doesn't mean they have to let anybody actually see it, which is a violation of the First Amendment, which talks about, they're not going to restrict speech. So by definition, you can't be free speech if you don't have free reach. So I ended up getting an investor. And we ended up started building out our own social media platform. And so we built that up now. It's called Pickaxe. We're in beta testing right now. We're officially going to be launching next month, so in February. And it's a completely constitutionally protected free speech social media platform. But we're also, and this is our main big hook, is that we're not doing all the algorithmic manipulations that you deal with on these other social media platforms. So if you are in an audience, then they decide to follow you, then they're actually going to see your content. And I actually set up the algorithms in a way to where it's not computer manipulated, it's actually influenced by humans. So the humans are the algorithm on the platform, which is pretty cool. And then we're working with a lot of content creators and helping them to monetize their content and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's really interesting as like a Christian, where I go through all these experiences, and you don't necessarily realize why you're going through it until down the road, looking back, you're like, oh, now it all makes sense why I was like banned and dealing with all these different kinds of things, because it led me to where I am today now, where I'm like, okay, now I'm in the tech space and building solutions to the problems that we're dealing with. So it's been a long journey. It's been fun. It's been wild, but now it's another chapter, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. So did you have much of a background in tech, or did you have to kind of learn that as you went when you realized that this was an area that we just were lacking in?
I've built websites for a lot of different companies and stuff like that. So I have a basic understanding, very basic from that standpoint. But I have a phenomenal dev team. And so the way that I've kind of approached it is I approach it from the user standpoint and the creator standpoint. Okay, what for me as a creator, what would I want in a social media platform? And then I go to my development team, and my CTO, she used to work for Facebook and Instagram as a lead engineer, and then over at Amazon and all that kind of stuff. So she knows the game from that side of the fence. And so it helps us to figure out, okay, how do we be a free speech platform, but still in this whole marketplace of censorship and big tech and all that kind of stuff. And so, I basically just go to them with basically, this is what I'd like to do. Can we do it? And pretty much every single time I come up with some crazy idea, they're like, yeah, we just have to do this workaround or this thing. And that's been the really interesting, like, learning experience for me, is how easy it is to actually be a free speech platform or be human centered. And what's interesting in being in this space now, I'm realizing it's not that these platforms can't be free speech. It's that they don't want to, because they want to control the narratives. They want to collect your data, because they're all, including the alternative sites, Truth Social, Getter, all the platforms, they're all going AI. They're all collecting your data to build artificial intelligence to, push out the human being. Like, it's crazy when you start diving into this. And so I just looked out with a phenomenal development team, and I can just go to them with my crazy bonker ideas, and we're like, okay, yeah, we can make it happen.
Well, it sounds like they must have the same passion for protecting free speech, which I think is probably important in that kind of team.
Yeah.
Dad, were you ready for a question? You looked like you were writing some notes.
Well, I am. Yeah, and I'm always very interested, Jeff. So it sounds like you worked for quite a while in the Christian space with interviewing pastors, We're also Christians. This is going to be an interesting conversation tonight. And I wonder if was there a trigger that moved you from that space into the political space? And I'm sure, as we do, you've carried a lot of the same things with you from that side over to this side. But was there an actual trigger that kind of moved you into that space? Was it the COVID thing?
So partially, there's a variety of things that all seem to kind of converge at the same time. So a lot of the stuff that I was talking about in the Christian space, my show was just called Conversations with Jeff. And I would literally just sit down for an hour, sometimes 2 hours. One show was 6 hours long, and just picking people's brains, picking pastors' brains and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we were fighting, and I put together 2 books during the course of that time period on, a lot of the social justice, leftist infiltrations into the evangelical church. And so we were kind of fighting a lot of those kinds of battles. And the thing that I realized was that as time was going on, there was this kind of cult of personality that was happening within the evangelical church of you'd have these megachurch pastors with massive amounts of influence. And then there was these certain core tactics that I would see these guys do. And it would basically get loyalty to them over other pastors. It would help them to sell books. It would help them to, fill their pews on Sundays and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just sitting here and I'm like, that's kind of the opposite of what Paul was talking about when he's like, it's not about us. We're just the tools that God's using. You're supposed to be following Christ. You're not supposed to be following Paul or Peter or whoever it is. And what's interesting is that then COVID hit. And at the time I was doing my Christian podcast as just kind of a side thing for fun and all that kind of stuff. And I was a VP of operations for an ad agency out in New York. And then COVID hit. And then they basically let everybody go that wasn't actively working on an advertising campaign for a client. And because I was operations, I wasn't necessarily a creative, and there was no office to be operations over. I got let go. That day I was supposed to interview this one guy. And I called him. I was like, I got to cancel. I just got let go. I got to figure all this kind of stuff out. Which, by the way, it was the day after my birthday, so it was a great birthday. And so he started throwing ideas out, and in one of them, and he was a journalist, and one of them was, why don't we start a political podcast network? Since I already had experience in the Christian space, why don't we jump over and do this in politics? So I started kind of doing both. The Christian and the political, and then it just kind of morphed to where I started seeing the same tactics that I saw in the evangelical church being used in politics in order to manipulate people on all sides of the aisle, the whole deal. And so that, I think, has really been an eye-opening experience for me as well, where I'm like, okay, so why is it that the megachurch pastors and the politicians are both using the exact same tactics in order to manipulate you into doing their bidding? Well, probably because they both stem from the same source. And that's the reality of one of the things that we're dealing with. So jumping over to politics, it seemed like on one hand, kind of a drastic jump. On the other hand, it was kind of like a natural flow from what I was dealing with before, just because it was this different context, same tactics, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does, unfortunately. And you're right that, it all stems from the same thing, which we talk about every week. And that's the root source of all of this is evil, which part of the free speech battle is that you're up against evil forces. That's part of it. That's the manipulation behind all of this. So Pops, I know you probably kind of have other questions about what you just said. So before I go back to the whole censorship conversation, I'll let you finish your train of thought.
Well, Jeff, if I might, for just a moment, as you've been a fairly recent move from that space to the other, or do you think that there are certain issues today that are more specifically targeted, that we're dealing with, talking about evil and these things that are specifically targeted toward Christians? Is there a certain set of issues that you think are more impactful on Christians in general?
Honestly, I think the thing for me, and this has been one of those things that I think has been a negative ramification of the Trump presidency, is that I think that there has been this separation of people's faith from their politics to a certain degree of what influences them, and a lot of that became out of necessity because we kept defending Trump because he would have all these attacks, and we kept saying over and over and over again, we're not defending the guy, we're defending the policies. We're not saying he's this perfect pastor theologian, standard of righteousness, but he's getting the job done. But I think that that's morphed into this kind of separation of church and state, even though that's not what our founding fathers intended, and to where we're kind of compartmentalizing everything. And one of my biggest criticisms of the Republican Party as of late is how secularized it's become. Whereas in years past, it was very much an evangelical base, and now it's become very much more secularized. And I think on one hand, you can kind of take the approach, big tent policies, big tent, party and all that kind of stuff. But when push comes to shove, what are we actually fighting for? That's the thing that I don't really have a firm grasp on, and this is kind of why one of the reasons I've kind of walked away from the MAGA crowd, not because my beliefs have changed, but because I'm like, I don't know what we're fighting for. I don't know what we're standing for. I don't know the agenda that we're trying to implement, because it feels like it changes from day to day. There's no base principles. And also from the Christian standpoint, when you think about it, the foundational, principle of the United States of America is this idea that we're all created in the image of God. The Constitution does not work without that core foundational principle that we are created in the image of God. And because we're creating the image of God, we have certain value as an individual, not as a group, but as an individual. And that's why we have certain inalienable rights that cannot be taken away by the government. It's because they're given to us by God. And the government's job was not to give us the rights, but to protect the rights that God gave us, that they cannot take away. So by becoming much more secularized as a political party, we're not able to fight that fight anymore, because now it's not about, are you creating the image of God, because they're trying to distance themselves from God, because they're trying to be more big tent, bring in the left, bring in the independents, all that kind of stuff. But what we're losing is that foundational principle. And so the end result of that is a lot of really horrific policies. And I don't second guess my vote for President Trump, because, Kamala Harris is utterly catastrophic, but also some of the ramifications, especially in AI technology and the fast tracking of that technology by the Trump administration, could be the end of humanity as we know it. Like it could be far worse than anything that a President Kamala Harris would have ever done. But that's because there's not that foundational view that we have these inalienable rights, that we have to protect you as an individual. What the Trump administration is doing is what's good for the masses, what's good for America, the entity, not what's good for us, the individual. And that's in stark contrast with what the founding fathers actually wanted this country to be.
Yeah, that is so spot on, and 100% aligns with our whole view and our whole take on all of this. Do we still think we made the right choice in Trump? Yes. Was it the best choice ever? No, of course not. And you bring up some great points. I mean, AI being one of them. I think there's several things we could point to that we could go, okay, that's less than favorable. And you're exactly right. It's because the foundation is not there. And you bring up the core of that the Constitution was meant to protect the individual. And this current movement has nothing to do with the individual. And that's great for a democracy. But we're not. We're a republic. And that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's one of the reasons why, and I lost a lot of friends, and I kind of got, blackballed in conservative media for a while, is because I ended up endorsing RFK Jr. when he was running for president. But it was because of that very thing. And that I don't say that, RFK is a Christian, because he's self-admittedly not. But his core principles was very much more individualized than Trump. And I felt like that, like his worldview, even though I disagreed with him on some pretty major, theological issues, obviously, but his core, main, issues that he was focusing on was very much more about our individual rights, our individual right for free speech, our individual right for bodily autonomy, our individual right to not get sucked into wars and be drafted and get sucked into doing all these kinds of things. It was very much like, let's bring back our individual sovereignty as a country. That was one of the things that he was talking about when it came to like home ownership. And we got to figure that one out, because if you don't own property and you don't have an asset, then can you really be free when you think about it? Because now you're always going to be dependent upon somebody else for your housing or your food or, whatever it is. And I feel like the thing that like the Trump administration is really losing this fight on, because of how they're fast tracking everything, is that there is this affront and this attack on the individual. And they're kind of greenlighting a lot of it because it's what's best for America, the corporation, or America, the entity, not necessarily what's best for Americans, the individuals.
I really like that perspective. I think one of the things that we've explored and discussed with some of the previous guests, and we aired the Owen Shroyer thing here a week or so ago when he was, being critical of what has MAGA become, because so many of the things that Trump said he was going to stand for and he was going to work toward accomplishing, it's the same shifting sands that always seem to be underneath the politicians. They don't really stand on that bedrock of the Constitution, which, as you described, along with the other founding documents, have relied heavily on the hand of divine providence to influence the construction of those things. And we have no solid bedrock, so it's whichever way the political winds blow. And it seems like the MAGA movement at large is quite okay with having never got to the bottom of the Epstein thing, getting involved in other conflicts, bombing 8 or 9 countries since we got in over the past year. All of these things that we thought we were moving away from have now all resurfaced back into what the national policy is, and there doesn't seem to be any blowback from the MAGA group. And you just are concerned with the shallowness of people's understanding when they cast their vote. Is, okay, we got our guy in there, now let's just go home and pay attention to something else. I don't know, but you'd think there ought to be a lot more pushback than what there is for clear violations on campaign promises at the very least.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I think that, and like the problem that has happened with MAGA is that they focus so much on loyalty to Trump and not as much about loyalty to principle. And that's something that I think that we need to bring back, is that you, again, this goes back to this idea that you as an individual, you have a voice in that you have a vote. So when you vote for something, that is your voice. You should never be manipulated into voting a particular way out of fear, out of any kind of tactic, out of fear of, blowback or loyalty or anything like that. Your vote is your sacred vote, which means it's your voice in order to speak into the process of our country on which direction you want this country to go. This is this idea of we the people. And I think that what we've been seeing from like the Laura Loomer types and the cat turds and a lot of these, MAGA influencers, is this idea of it's about winning at all costs. But what is the cost? And that's the real question. So for me, it's like even as I'm building out Pickaxe and I'm doing that, my big focus there is to kind of bring back nuance and bring back conversations. And we're going to be doing a series of events that are in person over the summer around this theme of declare your independence. And it's this idea of like, you don't owe anybody anything. Like, you as an individual have your own belief system and you have your own vote and you have your own voice that you can do with it as you wish. That is the whole idea of what our founding fathers wanted for this country. You don't owe the Republican Party anything. Like I do not swear allegiance to Trump. I do not swear allegiance to the Republican Party. And I think I showed that when I backed RFK and I was actively trying to get him. And honestly, I think if there wasn't all that lawfare and everybody working against him, he would have had a decently legitimate shot. It would have been an outside shot, but decent. But when you actually sit down and you think about it, everybody thinks you have two answers, you have two solutions, you have two choices in every single issue. And I think for me, I'm looking at it and I'm like, but if you care about the truth and you care about your worldview, you care about your belief system, very rarely is the truth one of those two answers. Usually it's either somewhere in the middle, or it's this completely out in left field third option or fourth option or fifth option that nobody's even talking about. And I feel that way when you're talking about Israel. I feel like that way when you're talking foreign policy. I feel that way when you're talking about, AI, all these things, is that we're given this binary choice, whether it's Democrat, Republican, or Trump or not, or whatever, when in reality, the truth is somewhere else that we're not finding in the conversation at all.
Jeff, would you subscribe to the notion that I think part of that is continued to be fostered to keep us divided? If you can keep things that polarized, it really keeps our focus. I would like to say, and we have on many of our previous podcasts, that I think almost everybody that lives inside the Beltway down there is a criminal. None of them have upheld their oath. They have all lied to us. They've all stolen and cheated. But I think they keep us away from focusing on that issue by forever promoting this division and making it a party line thing, even if what the party is going for this year is the exact opposite of what it was going for 10 years ago. And most of the people that follow along don't seem to recognize that they're cheering for exactly what they were fighting against 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, you're right. I think the big motivation, though, when it comes to at least the politicians and the parties. Now, again, there's the whole deep state intelligence agency manipulation that's happening behind the scenes. That's kind of underneath all this kind of stuff. But the root issue when it comes to a lot of the political rhetoric and the constant wedge issues is that neither party actually wants to fix the problems. And this goes also for the NGOs. This also goes for other nonprofits. It goes for also nobody actually wants to fix the problem. And I think the example, and this is why I think everybody was so upset when Trump first came in to the race, is because the Republicans. How long have we been fighting over illegal immigration? How many decades have we been fighting over this kind of thing? Neither party actually wanted to fix the problem because they knew that whoever was the opposition party, all they'd have to do is point at whoever's in charge and say, like, look, they're not fixing it. Vote for me, donate to me, and we'll go do this. If you fix illegal immigration, that takes away one of your biggest fundraising tools. So then what you do is you just keep it going. You do enough to show like, hey, yeah, I'm fighting this fight, but not enough to actually fix the problem. And this just keeps going back and forth over and over and over again. A perfect example of this was I have a personal experience where we were trying to recall Gavin Newsom out here because I live out here in communist California. And I was putting together a series of events to try to get out the vote, some rallies and things like that. And I had some really cool, ideas for events. Like I was going to bring out Mini AOC, remember her? And she was going to do a debate with a Trump impersonator, and we were going to do like all different kinds. It was going to be a lot of fun. I talked to all the GOPs out in the area. Nobody wanted to get involved with anything. I'm like, what's going on? Like, finally, I had one person tell me off the record that Kevin McCarthy, who was Speaker of the House at the time, told everybody don't spend any money on and really any effort on recalling Gavin Newsom because we don't actually want to recall him. This is a move because we want him to be the boogeyman for us to raise money off of for the midterms. And so they actually wanted to keep Gavin Newsom in place so that way they could have a boogeyman to fight against to raise money, so that way they could raise money for the midterms. That is the dirty secret in politics, is that they need the boogeyman. They need somebody to raise money against. So that means, by definition, we don't actually fix problems. And so when Trump came in back in 2015, it's like, hey, you've got your 68-point plan to fix illegal immigration. I've got 2: build a wall and deport the illegals. Everybody's like, we don't. That would actually fix the problem. We don't want that to happen. That's why you had both sides of the party going after him. Mm-hmm. But that's the problem that we're dealing with, is that they're pitting us against each other to keep themselves in power and raise money and elevate themselves. And they will continue to have power over us and control over us as long as we keep playing this stupid game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit, just because World Economic Forum starts today, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about really ties into the things that we see these quote unquote elites discuss over in Davos every year, and Trump is attending. And typically the things that they discuss are very much in line with, kind of what you talked about a little bit ago: losing property, losing individuality, losing any rights that we have left to us. And you mentioned, of course, that all the AI infrastructure and all of the money being poured into AI right now by this administration is a huge concern. And it's one of the major themes of the WEF this year. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that a little bit. What do you think will come out of that, if anything, that we don't already have in progress?
It's just, in my opinion, it's going to be a further endorsement and further push for the implementation of artificial intelligence, because by definition, what AI is doing is centralizing the power, because it's centralizing all the data. That's really what it's doing. You listen to Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, all these guys. What are they all saying? They're all saying that AI and robots are going to replace the need for any human to be in the workforce at all within the next decade. So no more humans working. What does that mean? It means that you don't support yourself. It means that if you don't work, how can you be an individual with sovereign rights and individual rights? How can you be free if you are dependent on somebody else for your income? And I think what's even more sinister is that what Elon and some of these guys are actually promoting now is universal basic income, but not from the government, but from them as the entities who are taking away your jobs, which means, last I checked, a private company doesn't owe you your constitutional rights. That's the government's job to preserve them. So if a private company, and this is this whole fight that we had over free speech and censorship and all that kind of stuff, if a private company decides, hey, you know what, we took away all your jobs, but we really don't like that you're spending your money here, or we really don't like that you're saying this, or we really don't like that you're doing X, Y, and Z, they just cut you off. What recourse do you have? Because you can't go get a job because there's no more jobs. You can't go. You really think that the government's going to give you enough money in order to pay your rent and put food on the table? That's not going to happen. So what recourse do you have for individual liberties? You don't, because you will be beholden not even to the government, where you actually have a say theoretically and stuff, but you're beholden to a private company for putting food on your table and a roof over your head. That's where all of this is going, and it's centralizing the power. And this, like, basically Elon, he tries to position himself as being this anti-World Economic Forum guy, but the technology that he's building is everything that the WEF wants in order to implement. And I think it's basically, he just doesn't want the World Economic Forum to control it all. He wants to control it all. And he kind of has this God complex and this Jesus complex when you actually think about it, because when you think about like what he's actually doing, he's using Neuralink in order to have the ability to erase your memories and replace them with new ones. He's making the blind see. He's making the paralyzed walk. He's also talking about rapturing up a certain segment of the population going into outer space. Like, he kind of has this God complex when you actually think about it. And it's really dangerous for the future of humanity. Like, basically, the end game in all of this, as Elon said to Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of years ago, it's going to go in one of two ways. It's either going to be Terminator, where the robots take over completely, or it's going to be heaven on earth, which is basically the way he described it was the movie WALL-E that Pixar put out several years ago. So it's neither one is really a good scenario.
Right.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all. Go ahead, Bree. I'm sure you had a follow-up.
Oh, I was just going to say, we're walking our way right into the plot of Idiocracy. And it's so painful because it's so spot on, especially with like the robots and the chaos of the noise of the constant TV screen, internet screen, not having to get up off the couch. I mean, this is exactly what it feels like. And you watch a movie like that and you think, well, that could never happen. But when you think about what the future would actually look like if none of us had jobs and all of us are just consuming and taking in whatever we can all the time, there's no other outcome. So how long does humanity even exist when that is our reality? Can it at all?
I don't know. It'll be for a short time. They're gonna dangle things like universal basic income, and Elon is saying this was the other crazy thing that I think should be a red flag to everybody. And I'm hearing hardly anybody actually talk about this. But Elon went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it wasn't just on the podcast, but it was also in the Tesla shareholder meeting, where he was talking about how he's using capitalism in order to usher in a communist utopia. His words. And what he's saying is that the way he explained it was that communism always failed because they had a lack of resources. And so they would run out of resources at a certain point, and then that's why communism always fails, is because they run out of resources. But if you have robots that can do all these things, then you're never going to run out of resources. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, where's all the conservatives in the MAGA crowd going like, Trump, you should stay very far away from this guy. You should probably shut this down ASAP. He's lit because he can do this whether the government actually wants him to do it or not, because of how much power he's going to have with all this technology. Like, when you think about it, he's got control of telecommunications. He's got control of social media. He'll have the robots. He's a government military contractor. Like, you've got all these technologies that he's got access to and the ability to have. And you're just sitting here like, he literally said he wants to usher in a communist utopia. What is the definition of that? No personal property rights. You're going to own nothing, and you're going to, quote unquote, be happy. You're going to be completely reliant on them. You will have zero freedom. You will be a slave to whoever is in control, i.e. Elon Musk. And nobody's sitting here being like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea to go down that route. And so at a certain point, natural human instinct is to basically get more greedy at a certain point. So then all of a sudden, now you've got however many billions of people on this planet that are going to be reliant upon these tech companies, and they're not producing anything. They're not contributing anything to society. So then you're going to start sitting there and you're going to think, okay, number one, we've got suicide that's going to skyrocket. I just had a psychiatrist on my show last week, and we were talking about this thing where like mental illness is going to skyrocket. We have more dependency on drugs. You're going to more drug addiction, more all mental health issues. So that's going to be scooping up a lot of revenue and a lot of, resources and all that kind of stuff. At a certain point, they're going to be like, it's not really worth for us to support all these people. And then what happens to all the people? They cut them loose? Are we going to use euthanasia? Like, what is going to happen? Because this thing can only last for a certain period of time when you take away people's purpose for living in this kind of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's very curious you say that, Jeff, because immediately my mind went to, it seems like when folks get very comfortable, you start to have the whole tranny thing become bigger, those whole really out of mainstream type practices that people seem to become engaged with are all when they don't have something else to do. And then to follow up on that, we already see countries around the world that are introducing the idea and carrying out those acts, euthanizing people that have no longer provide a usefulness, or they have something that the rest of society no longer wants to deal with, or maybe they just choose they want to go out, but they are making this more mainstream as well. So I think that's kind of walking hand in hand with the picture you just painted. But before that, the discussion that really jumped out to me was this is, I think, why they keep us distracted from those basic principles and the very small, allotted, delegated authorities that were intended to be at the federal level. That's why they keep that on the background. They wave it around at campaign time, but the Constitution is nothing that any of them are intend to live by or are pushing an agenda to try to live by. And subsequently, I think the masses simply have no idea what that thing is supposed to provide for them. And that is the guarantees to the personal liberties that we started this conversation out with tonight. It's the whole premise of this country, and the Constitution was where we had enshrined for us the means of protecting those very things. So I think that by design is kept out of the conversation. And as long as we're providing something through the government to the masses, there's never enough political pressure to change the direction.
Yeah, well, it's a really good point, and I think also, as Christians, I think the thing that we also have to remember is that this is also an attack on our faith. It's also an attack on God Himself, because basically, and this is part of the problem with our politicians as well, is that they in large part they do not believe in the foundational principles of this country that I laid out earlier, which again very, very strongly rests in this idea that God exists, God is real, God created us, and because God created us, we have certain inalienable rights because we were created in His image, and He gave us those rights. And because our politicians don't necessarily believe that, which is also a reflection on the fact that a huge percentage of Americans don't necessarily believe that either, it's also an indictment on the church. It's also an indictment on Christians as well, because we've got a lot of pastors now that are standing up and quote unquote fighting this political battle. But where's the actual preaching of the gospel? Like when you actually sit down and you think about it, because that's the one thing that would turn things around, is that if we had more people that actually had faith in Jesus, we had more people that were Christians, then our politics would actually reflect that to a certain degree.
Yes, it would.
And we're actually losing this fight because, like, think about this. And I brought this up to a lot of people and nobody can give me a good answer on this one, is that when's the last time that you saw any influential pastor actually preach the gospel to the lost? Like, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any big name, anybody who's got any kind of influence. They'll write a book about it. They'll have a conference about it. They'll preach about it on Sunday around within the four walls of their church. They'll have debates about it. They'll talk on Christian podcasts about it. But when's the last time you actually saw somebody go out and preach the gospel to the lost? It very rarely ever happens. And if you do, it's one random Joe Schmo guy off on a corner, with no influence, and everybody just ignores him because he looks crazy and all that. Like, nobody's actually preaching the gospel to the lost like they used to do back in the day. That that to me, like everybody's like, oh, church attendance and church. No, that is a reflection of the fact that nobody's actually becoming a Christian. You have all these church pop-ups, but what do? They just steal church members from other churches because they're the newest thing in town. Like nobody is preaching the gospel. And that is, I think, why we're in the mess we're in right now, is because if you don't believe in the gospel, you're not a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you don't have a Christian worldview. If you don't have a Christian worldview, then you may or may not believe that God even exists. Mm-hmm. This is how we get to where we are right now. This is all connected together, and it's because Christians were failing at our mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you pointed that out early on, as the folks that are sitting in those positions are striving for their own glorification or their own wealth building. The passing along of the actual message gets lost because that's no longer the focus. One of the things we talked about last week, where are the peacemakers? You see this craziness going on in the country, different places around the country. Minneapolis, of course, is the big one, but Seattle and other places are just as bad. Maybe not quite receiving the attention that they are because of the large dollars being pilfered out of this country. But where are the peacemakers? Talk about Christian roots and Christian values. Where are the people standing up with national platforms and bully pulpits to be passing along the very gospel? Let's find a peaceful resolution to this before we're promoting killing each other, which is what's happening, that's going on today. And it speaks loudly to the point you just made, is largely we have lost our foundation, that being Christianity, Christ, and the constitutional principles that we're supposed to protect all of us from the very things that are going on today.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's one of my frustrations with even you look at our foreign policy, you look at the rhetoric that's happening, you look at all none of this is a reflection of our faith. And I'm somebody that very supportive of the military, but our military should be used for defensive purposes. Everybody uses the excuse for our nation's best interest and national security and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but you could justify anything under those very extremely general terms. And at what point are we just going to realize that the CIA is typically the intelligence agencies that's behind a lot of the government overthrows and the regime changes and all that kind of stuff? Why do we keep playing this game? When has that worked out? Okay, sure. After World War II, the regime change of getting rid of Nazis. Yeah, sure. Outside of that, when have we had a successful regime change out since World War II? We've been involved in all of these countries, and what ends up happening is we get somebody out, and then somebody comes in that's worse than the previous guy, or we control them. But should we be controlling other countries? I don't think so. I think we should have a very strong defense. We should have a national defense. And if we're going to support another country militarily, it should be to defend them, not to help them to go on the offense. And I think that there is a very strong biblical case for war in certain scenarios, but just meddling and involving ourselves in other countries. Number one, you could say for example with Venezuela, oh well, there's the oil situation, there's this and there's that. Why should that even bother us? When you think we should be completely self-supportive, we need to stop relying on foreign countries for our resources. We need to cut China off at the knees, stop manufacturing there. We should not be doing any kind of manufacturing or importing or relying on any other country for any main resource that we need in order to function for our national security. You talk about national security, we should be completely self-reliant. And then we only do, business with other countries for extra things, nice things. We want to import champagne from France or whatever it is. That's fine, but that's not. But we shouldn't be relying on pharmaceutical drugs from China. We shouldn't be relying on oil from Venezuela. We shouldn't be relying on any of that kind of stuff. So we shouldn't be involved in any of these countries pretty much at all. It's like with Israel. Sure, let's defend them. October 7th, we should definitely defend them. But then should we be going on the offensive with Iran? I don't know if there's a good case for that one. So it's how we look at this and what's our worldview, what's our belief system when it comes to all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said it earlier that foundation just isn't there. And I think that comes back to all of these topics. Nobody knows what it is that we're supposed to be tied to. And like you said, kind of separating yourself from MAGA, so have we, and so have so many people. And I think there are so many people that have this mindset that we should be able to find a solution, but we can't. And maybe that's because there's not really a place for us to all communicate openly. You said it earlier with, okay, you have the free speech, but you don't have the reach. So I think there are plenty of us who want these things and who agree with everything that you just said. But actually connecting, finding each other, and then using that force to find the solution, I just don't know. I mean, maybe once Pickaxe is up and running, but outside of that, there's not a lot of tools for it right now.
Yeah. Like realistically, there's Rumble Video, and there's Pickaxe, right? And like that's the thing, is that there's not a lot of space for that. But even then, there's a lot of this mentality of, we're lied to and told constantly that like you have to pick one of the binary choices. And I can't tell you how many of my friends and my peers reached out to me when I left Trump and I backed RFK Jr. when he was running for president. I'm like, Jeff, you're an idiot. What are you talking about? Like, he's got no chance of winning. And I was like, even though, yes, we're doing everything we can to try to get him to win, it wasn't about winning. Like, when you actually think about it, it was leverage, and it paid off when you think about it. Because in the real polls, RFK was polling at about 20%. If you look at how they were actually conducting the polls, his polling consistently was at about 20%, despite the fact that all of his money was going to security and fighting lawsuits. So, but the thing that I kept telling everybody is, I'm like, think about this. If you could have a candidate that could just get 5% of a vote, that's enough to sway an election. Mm-hmm. If we were able to coalesce and bring together 3% of the vote, now you have leverage. Now guess what can happen? If you have 3% of a vote, now you could go to a candidate who's running for president. You could go to a political party and say, look, we're walking unless you give us some concessions. Mm-hmm. Think about that. That's what Matt Gaetz did when he was in Congress and he challenged Kevin McCarthy. He took what was it, 9 Republicans? I forget how many Republicans. And then he used a very, very small percentage of Republicans, joined forces with Democrats. Like, look, Kevin McCarthy, you're going back on your promises. You either do what you're supposed to do, or else we're walking and we're going to basically recall you, for lack of a better term. Like, mm-hmm. And he pulled it off with like a handful of Republicans. Like, that's the kind of power that we have. But you're not led to believe that by the establishment, because they say, oh, well, you have no chance of winning. It's not about winning. It's about getting leverage. And I think that if we realize that finally, then I think that we could actually coalesce and then actually have a significant voice when it comes to even certain elections coming up as well, where it's like, okay, right now the writing is on the wall. It's going to be J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. I don't like either one of those guys, especially J.D. Vance. I like him personally. But when it comes to him fast tracking artificial intelligence and his ties to Silicon Valley and all that kind of stuff, I don't want him anywhere near the White House. And everybody's like, well, it's the writing on the wall. You can't do anything. Well, what if I could get 5% of Republicans to say, yeah, we don't want J.D. Vance? Then all of a sudden, you're like, we're not going to vote for him in the general election. And now you actually have leverage to either get concessions from him or get a different candidate in. But we have to realize that we actually have power in being a minority. The Democrats understand this. Republicans don't understand this because they want everybody to fall in line. But we have power, and just by producing enough results to get leverage. And RFK proved that, because he brought in, what was it, 10% of the vote, 20% of the vote, something like that. And then he was actually able to get a position in the Trump administration heading up HHS in a way that he never would have had an opportunity to do if he had not run for president, challenged the system, and got enough people to be convinced that he's the guy. Now he had leverage in order to come in and say, look, I'll come over, I'll endorse you. And then Trump basically offers him head of HHS. That's a major, major concession coming from a guy who's very big pharma.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I think sidecars right along with that is you're actually standing on principle. I think so many times people are just getting caught up because, well, that's our guy, and mostly don't even understand the use of leverage but the big thing I would say, and from a purist like myself who's going back to who's going to most closely represent us and the Constitution, it's standing on principle. And if we happen to be able to leverage because we've stood on our principle and we create some leverage for ourselves, I think that's great. But if more people stood on principle and knew what those principles were that we were supposed to be standing for, I think this country would be steered in a heck of a lot better direction. And the only other point I wanted to make when we were talking about the Venezuela thing and all of that, to me, it seems like it's a military-industrial complex working hand in hand with big media, and we're going to sell this notion to the American people that we know is very gullible. They all ran out and got a shot, and most of them would probably do it again. So I think they know that by using these various platforms that they have, all at the control of the big corporate interests, they can steer the political winds. And pretty soon there's nobody, not a whole lot of pushback against the Venezuela thing. Now we're talking about taking Greenland over one way or another. And you hear other voices saying there's almost absolutely no military value in establishing that. Now, maybe there's some minerals and things up there that they want to go after, but it just seems like we're accepting things that were not even discussed at the beginning of this campaign cycle. Quite opposite, actually. And if we stood on principle and forced our elected officials to stand on those principles, I think we'd be a far cry from where we're at today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I 100% agree. And the military-industrial complex is behind pretty much all of this. Greenland, interestingly, is about AI, and that's the thing that most people don't understand. They're going after the minerals that they need to develop artificial intelligence and specifically quantum computing, because they know whoever can get to quantum computing first and combine that with artificial intelligence will bring about whoever has the most power. And there's this race between like Elon and OpenAI and Microsoft and some of these companies and the CCP. And that's one of the reasons why Trump keeps floating Greenland, is because that's what Silicon Valley wants, because that gets them the minerals at a lot cheaper rate than they could if they had to import it from another country as well. So that's what's behind this whole Greenland thing. Mm-hmm. But it's really interesting looking at like for example, like Tucker Carlson is like, he's been a consistent voice as of late against the military industrial complex, against getting involved in a lot of these wars. And I don't agree with everything that Tucker Carlson says or, anything like that. But the attacks on him to discredit him on a personal level, I think, are despicable. And also there's this idea, and this goes back to this kind of two-team sport mentality that we have right now within politics, is that everybody sees everybody as all or nothing. And it's interesting for me because, like, I used to have that kind of mentality when it came within Christianity, because I was deeply involved with, like, okay, what's going on with these different pastors and who said what, and what pastor holds this theological position and is right on this and wrong on this. And if somebody was wrong, then they're just bad. They're a heretic. We don't want anything to do with them and the whole deal. And as time goes on, I start realizing, well, I agree with this one guy on this and I disagree with him on this. So why can't I link arms with them where I agree? And then let's debate and duke it out where we disagree. And I became very unpopular because I would hold that idea. And so, like, it's like I don't agree with, like, Dr. Michael Brown on very much of anything, but we agreed on social justice stuff. So I actually included him in my book. And I had several authors that were lined up in my group book project that walked away because I included him in that. And I'm like, but I agree with him on this, but he's wrong on X, Y, and Z. What does that have to do with the leftist infiltration into the church? Nothing. But there's this mentality of it's all or nothing. And I always say it's like the heresy hunters. You're trying to find the heretic in everybody. And I'm just saying, like, Trump is not all good, but he's also not all bad. Very few people are all bad. Nobody is all good. And so when we look at it from that perspective, what we should be doing is we should say, I will link arms with you on this issue. I'm not going to link arms with you on this issue. Same thing with like somebody like a Tucker Carlson, who's very divisive right now within conservative media, is like, when it comes to foreign interventionism, like, I think he's spot on. Some of the other things that he's saying, like being pro Qatar and all that kind of stuff, I disagree with him on, but that's okay. We can debate that. We can discuss that. But, like, it's like we've taken away that ability to have nuanced conversations anymore over these kinds of very nuanced issues that we're facing as a country. It's really frustrating.
Well, the scary thing about that to me is that goes to show that humanity is kind of ready to just accept this whole AI takeover, because we're now in this TikTok brain mindset, which I always, kind of attribute to, like, I think about the whole TikTok dance trends. everybody has to look the same and move in the same step, and everybody has to be doing the same thing, and there's no individuality, there's no unique thought process that goes on. And that's how all of these things are. We're like this little hive mind that we all gravitate towards this person. Oh, and now we all cancel this person. And the thing that progresses a society is not everybody agreeing. It's the disagreements. It's the debating on the subjects that we don't agree. If we stop doing that, we stop moving forward. And because so many people are so inclined to not have those conversations, it tells me they're fully ready and they've been walked right up to the pulpit where they accept the AI takeover. And they're totally willing to walk right down that path. So I know we're coming up right on an hour already. Let's just ask you, Jeff, what do you think, in your opinion, is the solution to a problem like that?
Honestly, it's breaking away from these systems that are trying to force you to not have those kinds of conversations. And the reality of it is that, especially when you're talking about like social media and all that kind of stuff, it's pretty much walking away from all the big tech social media platforms. It's because they're using algorithms to, and I think I just wrote an article on this. I forget if it was yesterday or last week or something like that, but where it's almost more sinister, the censorship that's happening today, because it's not overt, it's subversive. Because before, under Jack Dorsey, the censorship was, okay, you said something wrong, you're done. You're out of our ecosystem. You can go over to Gab, you can go over to Getter, you can go over to one of these platforms and talk in your own little echo chamber. This is worse because they're not kicking you out. They're just dangling the carrot of free speech. And then they're using the algorithms to get you to self-censor so that way you can get seen more. So they're doing the opposite approach when it comes to censorship, but it's still censorship. And I would argue that that's even more dangerous, because now they're actually brainwashing you and manipulating you in order to fit into their Overton window and not actually get into like discussions and debates and nuanced opinions and all that kind of stuff. And then, the Axe actually just came out over the weekend where they were talking about their new algorithms and their new revenue share model, which I think is very dangerous, because what they actually said is that, replies not only, no longer help you, but it actually hurts you. So the more you reply to people under your posts, the more that we're going to take away views from your primary posts. And so now you're going to penalize people for actually discussing and debating issues on the platform. That's a problem. And so when you actually sit down and you think about this kind of stuff, they are molding your mind and you don't even realize it, because you're just chasing the views, you're just chasing the clicks, you're just chasing those numbers and the analytics. And so you're going to cater your message in order to get picked up by the algorithm. And that's one of the big things that I'm working on with Pickaxe as well, is how do we create an algorithm that is actually organic and where you're not playing these stupid games. It's by having a human-centered algorithm. So I don't actually have an algorithm in place that is controlled by a robot, that's controlled by a machine, that's controlled by AI. It's actually certain things that are in place to where the humans on the platform actually dictate what gets seen, what gets recommended, what trends, all that kind of stuff, to where there is no intervening with AI from that standpoint and deciding what's seen. It's actually completely up to you. So I keep telling them, you're the algorithm. So you decide what gets seen by engaging with something, by liking something, by sharing something, by writing an engaging comment and all that kind of stuff. So that's really how we're building it. And right now, we're in pre-launch, and it's actually doing really well. And there's a lot of people. There was one post by this one guy, Aaron Everett. He was really big with the Kennedy crowd when Kennedy was running for president. He used to do videos, and RFK would share them all the time and all that. And he posted that he's like, I've got 10,000 followers on X and 100 followers on Pickaxe, and I'm already getting more engagement on Pickaxe than I am on X, with 100 times more of an audience. That's crazy. That should never be the case, but it is when you have the algorithmic manipulations that you have on these other platforms. And so so for us, our big hook that's getting a lot of people to come over to Pickaxe now is the fact that we're not manipulating people with algorithms, and we're kind of taking social media back to the way that it was supposed to be, which is social, which is, you actually connecting with other human beings. We weed out the bots, we weed out the anonymous trolls and all that kind of stuff. and we just make it about human connection, connecting with other human beings, conversing, having nuanced discussions, debates. And guess what? There's no manipulation. There's no Overton window. It's a free for all. That's what our founding fathers intended for communication to be. And so that's really a lot of what we're doing with Pickaxe.
Awesome.
100%.
Awesome.
Yeah. So do you think, Jeff, and I'm probably the last guy on earth that could be speaking in an AI arena or IT arena, but do you think the mechanisms are there that as you become a threat through Pickaxe platform, that they could start tripping you up and causing problems with your platform out there if you become too big of a threat to them?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, there's always something that somebody like an Elon or somebody can throw at you, and then it's about adjusting to it. And I'm super again confident in my dev team that like they're phenomenal. They understand the ins and outs of everything that's going on to where we can kind of overcome a little bit of anything that's thrown at us. The other component that we're really building into our infrastructure is we're going to be doing, like I said earlier, we're going to be doing in-person events and having human-to-human connection. We're also going to be developing different technological solutions for a wide variety of issues. And to where, if they take one thing down, we'll still have other things that are going on simultaneously at the same time, to where it would be very difficult in order to take down a business model that is decentralized in the way that we're building it. They could take down one, but we'll still have another arm somewhere else. Or, like we're going to be doing the in-person events. Like you can't really take away in-person events unless you just shut down the entire country. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Our mission is to help human beings to, number one, stay human, and number two, to actually have a voice. And so if we can, as a tech company, figure out how do we use technology in order to keep us human and amplify your voice and connect you more effectively with other people, then we're doing our job. Then it doesn't matter what the medium is. It doesn't matter what the mode. It doesn't matter what the platform is. It just matters about the mission. And then we just find different ways in order to make that happen.
Okay. Because I think I'm probably enough of a conspiracy guy that I would suggest that anytime there becomes a voice loud enough that starts to threaten the establishment, the agenda, they're gonna work to end that or to silence it or to minimize the impact in that might have on deterring their goals.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of it too is that with our business model and our for a tech company, our burn rate is very, very low. And so, it wouldn't take that many people to be a profitable company on the platform. And so I think, because most tech companies, and I talked to several venture capitalists when I first started this, and they're like, what you, and I have a friend that actually works for a startup, video game company. And he's like, they're burning through so much money. Like they're just trying to spend as much money as they can. They're spending millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. So then that way they can get to their next round of fundraising and get another $1 billion invested in the company. And I'm like, that's not sustainable. That's going for the grand slam every time, right? Mm-hmm. That's why there's a lot of companies that fail. It took until Elon for X to even be profitable, which is crazy. And so for me, I'm looking at it. How can we create a sustainable business model with not that many users? And I think with us, I think our sweet spot is probably going to be like 100,000 users for us to be a truly self-sustainable, profitable company, which isn't that many users for a social media platform. And I know several different CEOs of other social media platforms, CloutHub and Getter and all these different ones. And they a lot of them went with this model of just build, and you'll figure out how to monetize down the road. And I'm like, well, we're building our monetization into the launch of it, because that's one of our hooks, is for content creators to be able to monetize their content. So it's like, so we're starting out from the get-go. How do we be self-supportive and sustainable right from the get-go as fast as we possibly can? And we've got like advertising, we've got affiliate relationships. We're building our own affiliate centralized system in with a patent that we filed for how we'll actually help creators to be able to monetize their content through affiliate marketing. We've got paywalls. We've got Rumble integration into it to where you can monetize off of Rumble as well. We're gonna have email newsletter stuff that'll roll out in Q3, where we'll be able to sell advertising for like sponsored emails to, on behalf of our creator. Like there's so many things that you can do if you look at it from the perspective of how do we help humans? How do we help humans succeed? Because if our creators succeed, then we as a platform succeed. And so that's the way I built it up. And then now, guess what? Now they're all going to go out and tell all their friends and all their creator friends, hey, you guys should come over to Pickaxe, because guess what? Now I'm starting to make some money. Now I actually have a voice. Now I'm getting more engagement. And I feel like if we reward humans for being human, then we'll have loyalty from those people. And I don't need 1 billion people on the platform to be successful. And to a certain degree, I think we can kind of fly under the radar for quite a while, because like we're not competing with X because they're going for billions of people. I'm going for maybe millions. To them, we're chump change, but we can do a lot with that to help humanity. So
yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like a much better business model if I was looking to do it than the other description. But you know, it's been a really engaging conversation, Jeff. We always are amazed at how quickly these hours go by when we're in a good conversation like this. Hopefully we can have you back or get on your show sometime, or your platform once it's up and going.
Yeah, would love to. Definitely stay in touch. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and you know, if you guys can actually sign up right now on Pickaxe, just go to pickaxe.com. We've got the web version out. Anybody that's watching this, if you just send me a DM on Pickaxe and just let me know if you're on iOS or Android, I'll hook you up with the beta app. You get access to that. But we'll be launching the official app, for both iOS and Android, middle of February. I'll be announcing the dates here very, very soon. So
outstanding.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, we will do that. We will get signed up on Pickaxe for sure, and just love what you're doing all the way around. I think the in-person events component is just huge. Like you said, keeping humanity human. That's kind of part of the fight. So really commend what you're doing. Before we sign off, if there's anything else you want to close with, anywhere else that you can direct people to find you, all that good stuff, please.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, best other place to find me is just, you guys can tune in my show. I go to the Jeff Dornik Show. I'm on Rumble. And, I go live at 1:00 Eastern every day during the week, except for Wednesdays. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And I just had Dinesh D'Souza on the show last week. You get some fun conversations on the show.
I saw that one.
Yeah. It was fun. I wish I had more time to get into more nuance with him, but it was a fun conversation.
I was very intrigued by where that was going. I thought we might get into it a little bit tonight, but the hour's flown by. But I did listen. I watched that one. Yeah, it was great. Yeah,
totally. Well, the thing too, with Pickaxe in general is that I think that the nice thing that we're going to be dealing with is that we're getting a lot of people coming over with both small creators, big creators, and all that kind of stuff, because everybody's facing the same manipulation problems. And so, like we've been very lucky that like Children's Health Defense has come over, and Vigilant Fox, and Dr. Peter McCullough is coming over, and Dr. Pierre Corey, and we're getting kind of that center left, center right. We're getting a ton of gamers because of our Rumble integration. And so, kind of like in whatever your niche is, you're going to find some really cool people in there, and you're going to have a lot more direct access to them. And I think that's the thing that I think will be very exciting, is that not only we have access to them on the platform, but then a lot of them they're committing to like, okay, when we do the in-person events like Children's Health Defense, they're like, yeah, we'll show up, we'll be there. It'll be fun to do these kinds of things. And the nice thing about doing the in-person events too is that you're going to think twice about insulting somebody on social if you realize I'm going to see them next week at that event. I might want to tone it down a little bit. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it sure will.
Yeah. Awesome. Good. Incredible. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. We usually just close with a Bible verse and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Okay, for tonight, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. That's Proverbs 12:18.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. We really appreciated you spending an hour and some change with us. Definitely hopping on Pickaxe, and we will share that with our listeners. So with that, we'll close this one off.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Nice meeting you.
You as well. Thank you.
Alrighty, everybody. So there you have it. That was Jeff Dornik. He can be found at The Jeff Dornik Show on Rumble. I believe he's on Spotify, probably your other platforms as well. And definitely head over to pickaxe.com. We will share some links on our social media and all that good stuff for it. Remember to, like we said in the beginning of the episode, like, subscribe, follow, share, all that good stuff. And hopefully we'll be seeing you soon over on Pickaxe. So with that, anything else from you, Pops?
No, another great show tonight. Very, very interesting fella. I'm sure we could have gone on for another hour or so. There was a lot of different opportunities to go down different, discussion points. But it's always refreshing to have other people out there that are engaging folks through their efforts and the perspective that they bring. It was another great conversation. And thanks for lining that up.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Well, with that, everybody, you know where we'll be, right back here at the Virtual Buckman Tavern next week, Thursday, 6 p.m. Until then,
stay vigilant.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.